Welcome back to my channel, JDJ Planet, and to my podcast, God is an Artist. So, Gold Camp did come back out and determined that we need an entire new system, an entire new AC unit. He was talking about the system outside is basically fried. It's an older system. This is an older house, and all that stuff. He did suggest that we look into the grant program through the city of Florissant for like necessary home repairs. It doesn't cover cosmetic repairs, which obviously AC unit is not a cosmetic repair. And we'll be doing that soon so that we can have air and cool air here in the house for us and the babies. Right now we've got a couple of AC units running and a couple of fans. I got my little hand fan here. My son lost my other one, but that's okay. This is actually a Mother's Day gift from a couple years ago. And these little fans, you can get them from Dollar Tree for I think like $1.75, which inflation, right? Dollar Tree used to be everything was $1. But, you know, they got the little $5 section, their $3 section, $1.75 section, etc. So we're just doing what we can to stay cool in the house. And we will continue to do what we can to provide for our babies. And what's interesting about this particular struggle is how did God design parenthood? This part of the series, we're going to talk about like parental failure, parental shortcomings. And honestly, parent guilt is so real. And, you know, I saw a creator on TikTok shaming parents for not giving their kids attention, right? She was talking about how when kids do stuff and the parent is all like, oh, they're just doing that for attention. And she was like, well, just give them the attention. And, you know, it's interesting because in our society, parents are being worked to depletion and to exhaustion at their jobs, and they come home tired, ready to relax after a long day, and they can't be who their kids need them to be because of long work hours. So shout out to Bernie Sanders, who is trying to push 32-hour work weeks instead of 40-hour work weeks. Since we have AI now, since we have a lot of automated systems, then it would make sense that people can work less now, right? Millionaires, billionaires want to remain millionaires and billionaires, then you can rely on AI to do that. And let the rest of us breathe for a second. Let the rest of us get the rest that we need so that way we can focus on our homes and our children in an adequate way. I'm excited that the creative spot is getting ready to be open for more hours, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 10 to 5 and until 7 on Fridays. And honestly, I just hope to help families spend more quality time together, whether they're coming to the spot and experiencing the pay what you can activities that we have available, or if, you know, we start doing take home kits that would help families develop a new home culture that would increase the amount of quality time that they spend with each other. Because honestly, you know, when I think about our babies getting in trouble and getting into fights and brawling and things like that, you know, they are in desperate need of something to do. And when our parents are tired and when the schools are done for the day and when everyone else is out chasing their own ambitions, then the kids are left to their own devices. And I am really excited to provide a space that can support in quality time between families. The term village mentality has been on my mind. And what I mean by that is everyone takes care of everyone. Everyone plays a part in making sure that nobody goes without. You know, it's a lot of senseless killing going on. A mother just lost her life trying to provide for her babies in the community. Senseless violence, senseless shooting. And it's just the village needs to return. Right. There are a lot of young mothers and young parents who say things like, you know, I don't even have a village. I'm doing this by myself. We're doing this by ourselves. And it's just sad to see because while the corporations and while the companies and the enterprises and the billionaires get to thrive off the backs of exhausted parents, then it's like, okay, why don't we get together and be a village for the parents? So that way no one has to feel like they're alone and no one has to feel like capitalism is the only answer to, you know, surviving. It's really interesting. The older I get, the more I understand systemic problems and the macro level of problems. And it's interesting, you've heard people say poverty is an individual issue, that's a person's fault for not getting a job, for not applying themselves. And while that may be true to an extent, you have to consider the perspective that says if you don't participate in somebody else's wealth building, then you deserve to be on the street. And that's what the systemic problem is. I mean, just think about AC, for example. If we're not contributing to the wealth building of whoever runs air conditioners, then heat will be our portion, right? Same with Spire. Right now, they're saying we owe them money, and our gas has been off for a year. Our house was leaking gas, and they came and turned off the gas, but they don't cap gas anymore. And so, we've been making it work, right? Still staying clean, still keeping the babies clean, boiling water, still keeping the dishes clean, making it work. But that's why the term village mentality has been on my mind because I've been watching videos of African villages, African tribes, who seem to be living off the grid, right? Capitalism does not know them, at least not to the extent that it knows us here in the States. They don't have the most luxurious life, but they're happy and they take care of each other. And it's just like, God gave us this big, beautiful earth with all the water, all the trees for shade, all the animals to cook and eat, all the plants to look at, all the flowers to be amazed at their beauty by. And capitalism pretty much came and said, up. We're going to hog all of this and make you pay for it. And it's just really interesting to see all these problems from an adult perspective and, coming to understand why families have problems, why households have problems. And it's just about time for the village to come back. And so village mentality, get into it. So we're going to continue talking about parenthood. How did God design parenthood? We talked about being a surrendered parent. We talked about the different parent styles. We talked about the rod. What else did I talk about? I can't remember. At least not sitting here right off the top of my head. But now we want to get into, what does God do with parental shortcomings? What does God do with parental failure? Because at the end of the day, we are all human. And to be able to get it right 100% of the time is just virtually impossible for us. I mean, it's been like that since the beginning, which, interestingly enough, after this month, when I talk about Joseph and Moses and Esther in these next few weeks, including today, I'm going to get into how did God design salvation, how did God design sanctification, and how did God design surrender. So we'll definitely be able to get into why humans were never made to be perfect in the first place. But, today I want to get into the story of Joseph, and I want to talk about how Jacob showing favoritism led to envy being triggered in his other sons that led to them trying to sabotage Joseph. But ultimately, Joseph's faithfulness to the Lord kept him from being completely destroyed. And so we're going to get into this story. Not the whole thing. I highlighted a couple of parts. Of course, as always read the word for yourself. While those of us who love the Lord and those of us who are on a mission to make him make sense come on our platforms, to do our best, especially for those who are new to the faith and those who are probably returning from backsliding. It's very important that you have your own relationship with God that, would lead you to read the word for yourself. And so, let me make sure I go to the beginning where we begin. The beginning where we begin, the beginning where we end. So, starting in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3, it says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him at his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to them." So already, while Jacob might have his reasons for favoring Joseph, the favor that he showed Joseph definitely triggered envy and hatred in his brothers. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out of the field. Then suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed to it," right? Human nature would listen to this type of dream and automatically be offended. Like, who do you think you are to tell us that we're about to bow to you? And so they kind of plotted to kill him. And let's see here. Yeah, okay. Skipping on, still in chapter 37, verse 18, "But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. 'Here comes that dreamer,' they said to each other. 'Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams.' When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. 'Let's not take his life,' he said. 'Do not shed blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him.' Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father." So clearly not all the brothers were, on board with getting rid of Joseph, right? Reuben, his older brother, tried to save him. And so skipping down to verse 26, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So instead of deciding to kill him, they decided to sell him off. So they could get rid of him, thus ending their father's favor of him. Or so they thought, I guess. Joseph is sold off. He ends up in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, and this makes Potiphar angry, and he is thrown in prison. And so going to the end of verse 20, it says, "But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all of those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did." Joseph remained faithful to God, and in return, God protected Joseph, and God showed Joseph favor while he was in prison, right? So, a parent shows favoritism to a child, which ultimately is a parental shortcoming. You should strive to love all your children equally. And obviously the Bible is filled with messy people. So, they didn't have every single video in the world about parenthood and how to be a parent, right? And so skipping down to chapter 40, it's now talking about the cup bearer and the baker. They were attendants of Pharaoh, and they had been thrown in the same prison with Joseph. And so it says, "When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, 'Why do you look so sad today?' 'We both had dreams,' they answered, 'but there is no one to interpret them.' Then Joseph said to them, 'Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams.' And so he interprets the dreams. Unfortunately, the baker's dream foreshadowed his death, and the cupbearer's dream foreshadowed his freedom. And so, moving on to chapter 41, verse 9. It says, Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams. He interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream, and things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought to him from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream. No one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Once again, Joseph demonstrating his faithfulness to God, right? Attributing his dream interpretation to a gift from the Lord and not his own personal ability. And so he interprets the dream, tells him what it means, and then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. And so Joseph goes from being hated by his brothers to being in jail to being Pharaoh's right-hand man. My phone overheated just now, so it cut off. So hopefully I am starting where I left off, or at least in a good spot. Talked about how Joseph's faithfulness and the dreams bestowed on the dreams and gifts and the gift of dream interpretation bestowed on him by God led him to being able to be Pharaoh's right-hand man. And then Jacob sends his other sons to Egypt because of the famine. And then when they get to Egypt, they end up bowing down before Joseph like he had dreamt about before they sold him off in chapter 42, verse 6. And so, going forward, in chapter 45, Joseph makes himself known. It says in verse 4, Then Joseph said to his brothers, Come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. And so, it's interesting when parental shortcomings cause our children distress, cause our children to experience, trauma, even faithfulness to God and staying close to the Lord throughout your trials and tribulations will eventually bring you to a place of deliverance. And so, if you're a parent and you have experienced falling short, right? Failing. If you, couldn't for some reason do everything right and be everything right, and your shortcomings resulted in turmoil, you can count on the Lord to make right your wrongs, right? Not that he's going to, make you feel better for your shortcomings, right? I think guilt and shame are still necessary because we already know God is an undoer of shame. We still have to learn our lesson as parents when we do fall short, even when God is faithful to our children that are harmed in the process of our shortcomings. Joseph was able to save an entire nation because his faithfulness to God helped him overcome his parents or his dad's shortcoming and his brother's envy. With that being said, I'm going to end this video. Oh, okay. That's a happy sound. This is the end of the video. Next time, we're going to talk about Moses's mother, and we're going to talk about how God works when parents have to sacrifice their children, when parents have to give up their children, when parents can't keep their children, and when, those who are faithful to the Lord have to make a tough decision to surrender their children. So tune in for that, and I will see you in that video.